Alright, thank you everyone for coming today. Today we're going to be going over just sound design, how to make sounds, how to best use them, what they're for. So, today's question of the day is, what is the most memorable or iconic sound effect you can think of? And this just goes for the whole thing. This doesn't have to be limited specifically to games. They find great effect in games, but you can also find some fantastic ones in TV shows or movies. So,
I would say the collision sound effect in the Source engine, found in Half-Life and Gmod and other games.
yes.
Pretty famous slash infamous for its repetitive.
It's the help screen.
Yep, that's a classic one.
Yeah, someone mentioned that in the Discord.
The ring sound effect is on.
Yeah.
No footsteps sound effect from Source in general.
That one is used quite a lot.
That's in a good bit of stuff.
For me, it's the item sound in Silent Hill games.
Yes.
Reloading the 1911 and Fallout 1.
Damn, we're right.
Oh yeah, and we're right pain.
Anything else?
Screen.
Yeah. Any others that specifically, it doesn't have to be specifically sound effects, it can also be like audio cues and such.
FNAF's jump scare sound effect.
Hear that one all too often.
Someone in Discord said the Zelda chest opening jingle.
That's a classic.
I've heard that in a while.
The alert ping and Snake.
Yeah, Metal Gear Solid, yeah.
Very
I get what you mean.
That is my favorite space.
Alright, so yeah. Sound effects can be very memorable. That's the statement. Yeah, go ahead. So, the main use of sound effects is to convey information, to tell the player that something is happening. You know, basically anything that has an action, including the player's own actions, should have sound effects, just so they know. It's an additional source of information, it just sort of helps lend an impact to everything, and can sort of... The intensity of a sound effect can let you know the danger of it. If you hear just like small footsteps, not small footsteps, like quiet footsteps, that might think, oh, there's someone nearby, but it's going to be inherently less dangerous than, you know, loud running footsteps. And I didn't write this down here, but generally, if you're going to have sound effects for player input, you should have them start off nearly instantly. You know, a lot of sound effects have like build up or things where they sort of fade in. And that's good for enemy attacks, where they sort of do what they're doing in advance.
Before games.
Yeah. But if you're giving a sound effect to the player, you want it to be instantaneous. You want them to press the button and instantly hear the sound saying, alright, your input was confirmed. And that's especially for things like slow attack animations. If you ever played Smash Bros., whenever you start charging up a smash attack, you know, it's a long animation. So it plays a sound the moment you start doing it so that you know, yeah, I'm charging a big attack, even if the character's still, you know, pulling back for it. You're not really certain. Yeah, basically anything and everything should be given. Well, not anything and everything, but anything that is of importance to the player should have some sort of sound effect, even if minor, just because otherwise it's very easy for things not directly in the player's sight to just completely vanish from their minds. Just a small example, there's a game I play called Deep Rock Galactic. There's an escort mission where you have to guard this giant drill throughout the entire caves. And for the most part, like, whenever it's under attack, it plays this loud alarm sound, so you know, hey, you gotta go kill the things attacking it. But during the final stage of it, where it's completely stationary, the alarm doesn't play, because it's supposed to be the focal point of it. You know, you're defending it from the giant wave of enemies. But oftentimes, me and my friends just get so caught up defeating the enemies that we just completely lose track of its health bar until it's too late. So yes, even if you think, oh, this is going to be in the player's forefront of mind, it's not guaranteed to be. Even the player's own health can be just completely lost in the chaos. So, sound effects on anything and everything that the player should know about and react to. So sound effects also are good for clarity, because video games are getting very pretty. They've been very pretty for a while, but sometimes it's difficult to tell what's actually happening beneath all the pretty going on. You can see here, some games, it's kind of difficult to tell what's going on in some of these shots, you know? Especially the things where you need to know the information the most are often the most chaotic ones. So sound effects can help add clarity there. If there's a really scary enemy showing up, a distinct sound effect can help you actually know, hey, there's a dangerous guy, instead of having to see him through this. And furthermore, as I said on this point here, just the mere presence of having your player cause sound effects can also be a good indicator of how things are going. Because, you know, if you're still making sound effects, things are happening. And it means that your character's still doing things. The Xenoblade Chronicles series, it's a very good series. But if you listen to any of the battles, basically every single character is constantly shouting off voice lines. Well, I personally love it. I understand a lot of people don't. But it does also serve as a useful barometer, because as long as you hear your party members shouting at the top of their lungs while fighting, you know they're all still alive and actually doing things. And, you know, you're fighting a boss and all your guys get knocked down by some attack, it just suddenly goes quiet, and you realize, uh-oh, there's not constant voices anymore, that's the problem.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It can also be an issue though, because the sound effects can clash. So you may
Yeah.
not understand, like, okay, usually like a sound effect that plays when the enemy is about to charge up, you may not even be able to hear that because all the other extra sound in the background.
Yeah,
So
so
I
it is a bit of a trade-off. And again,
Yeah.
in games where things can scale up and you can get a lot of sounds, it can be a bit difficult to pick out individual ones, but just the mere presence of player-causing sound effects can sort of give you an idea of, all right, I'm still alive and still doing things, at least for the time being. But yeah, it's a difficult thing to work with. And just the last thing to say is, something I should have emphasized a bit further is that sound effects should be working together with your visuals. When your visuals are too cluttered, your sound effects can help provide clarity, and when there's a lot of sound effects going on, you should be able to still look at the screen and see visual cues for what's going on. You shouldn't use one to replace the other, ideally. Sound effects also add identity. I asked this question at the beginning of the day, you know, what's an important or iconic sound effect? And a lot of them are tied to specific actions, or you can think of a specific memory or scenario when think about it. Like, specifically for me, things like the source engine collision sounds or the metal footsteps are just things I can instantly think of just because they just work with the rest of the game. So giving a powerful attack or a powerful item, weapon, event, literally anything, giving it a strong sound can make it far more memorable. And I've collected some of my favorite sounds here. We don't play it just yet. Do we have control on the volume? It might be a little loud. I don't know how loud it is.
We'll just test and see.
Alright. Hand on the volume? Right. Alright. So even if you don't know where all of those are from, you could probably tell the impact from some of those, the importance they have. So, yeah, a strong, unique sound effect can really help differentiate a certain enemy or a certain moment or a certain anything. And another, just off the top of my head, example is in Star Wars Episode 2. There's a, I think it's called a breach charge?
No.
I don't know. So there's a very certain sound effect for just a very basic thing. Obi-Wan's just flying his ship through an asteroid field, deploys, goodness, I'm a fake fan, deploys some sort of object to just rip across the asteroid field, and it has just this incredible sound to it. Like, it's such a standard space thing, oh, just breaking asteroids to maneuver through safely, but the sound effect is incredibly powerful. I'll see if I can load that up after this. So, as we said before, though, you don't want to overdo too many sound effects, otherwise it can just become background noise, and the information meant to be conveyed is just lost completely. You know, especially things in old games, low health beeps that continuously go off over and over. It just feels more annoying than worrying, just because, yeah, you know you're low on health, but the game keeps screaming at you about it, and it can be more frustrating than anything. I think I already said that.
Pokemon Black.
Well, that's actually, they do something different.
Yeah, it's like
Well,
if
go
you're
over to the next slide, don't worry. Sorry, don't mean to interrupt.
No, you're
but,
good.
yeah, so generally, if you have a sound effect that's going to be repeated a lot, you're either going to want to record multiple variations, or something else you can do is give them a random pitch variation. I know most game engines will give you an option to at least set the pitch or the speed of the sound effect, and even varying it a slight amount can give it a lot less, well, it gets old a lot less quickly. Like even just a very minor 5% range in either direction brings a lot of life and variety into it. So it's definitely worth something messing around with. So otherwise it gets repetitive. So low health beefs, I talked about this before, nobody really likes them. But much like every other rule in game design, it is something you can go for if you are absolutely confident in your work. Though again, for something like a sound effect that plays in the common area, you should be extra careful about this. But two games that do interesting things with the low health beeping are Pokemon Generation 5, Black and White as we have here, and Axiom Verge. So for Pokemon Black and White, it takes the low health beep, and instead of just playing it over and over, it makes it into a full song by itself. So take a quick little listen to that. It's a little less repetitive that way, even though the beat is still there. It's integrated into the song. It's a very short loop because you don't really want to spend too much time in there, but it makes your time spent there a little less annoying. Don't start the next one yet.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, just personal opinion, is this isn't a universal bullet because sometimes it runs into the issue of the danger song starts interrupting better songs. Going back to Xenoblade Chronicles, one of the gimmicks of the game is that your main character can see into the future, and that shows in the gameplay sometimes an enemy will start doing a really strong attack, and you have an opportunity to stop it. The problem is that whenever you do this, it starts playing a new song for the rest of the battle, and this overwrites even things like boss themes.
Ooh.
Like, I'm pretty sure everything other than the actual true final boss gets overridden by the You Stopped the Bad Thing Happening track, which it isn't a bad song, but it's not always ideal to have it overriding better songs, especially some of the very dramatic ones. Yes?
I was thinking about the same thing, but it wasn't for a low health thing. It was more with the whole game interrupting, but it was so Sonic Unleashed.
Yeah.
On stage fighting. That jazz song, it's a good song on its own, but it keeps interrupting the night themes every single time you get to it.
Yeah, and it's very often you counter enemies, so you're not even gonna hear the full song really.
Yeah, so again, this is one of the things you want to make sure you know what you're doing before you do this. I think, oh dear, I think Pokemon can get away with this because it's, more of a turn-based game. The turns are gonna go by hugely quickly, so you have plenty of time to heal or switch out or just let your Pokemon die and it'll fix the music. You're not really too far away from a healing option anytime, so you can just get out. But for other more action-oriented games, where health isn't so easily accessible, well, here's what Axiom Verge does, is it also has a low health beep, but it is synced to the music, and it actually fades to the background over time. So it's almost like it becomes sort of a instrument of itself. So got about 40 seconds of just doing it in various scenarios. That last one, it sort of cuts in long enough to let you know, hey, you're in danger, but then fades back out, so it sort of increases the tension of the fight because it's beat with the song, but then it fades back, so it's not annoying you when you're trying to dodge. I think, personally, I'm biased. I prefer the latter implementation, but you can go for either. Depends on your game.
That's really clever. I didn't even think about doing that.
Yeah, it's a very nice detail, and it's stuff like that that really makes you appreciate it. Like I haven't played this game in 2 years before going back to record that footage. There is a reason I still remembered it. And that's one of them.
There's some games that I know that use this of heartbeats to show low health as well.
Do not do it like Luigi's Mansion 3 though, because that game is almost perfect, but when you get to low health, the heartbeat drowns out literally every other sound in the game.
Legend of Zelda is notorious for this too. I hate when you get low on health. I sometimes just kill Link so that I don't have to hear it anymore.
Yeah.
That's how bad it is.
So yeah, again, it's something you can do some cool things with, but generally it's best to just play one sound when you're low and then let the player deal with them. Yes?
If I remember correctly, and take this with a grain of salt, this is late, but Code Vein, I'm pretty sure, has does have a case and that plays whenever you do get low health, but I think it also slightly muffles the music for a short amount of time, and it sort of just makes everything in a monochrome sort of color as well for good.
Yeah, so it's important to drag your players' attention to the fact that they are about to die if they don't change up their strategy. It's just, don't keep yelling about them permanently. Usually, the reason I bring this up mostly with retro games is because it's generally a solved issue by now, but some people really just don't like their players hearing things, so make sure that's not you. Do something cool with the low health beep, or just play the low health sound once and then just let them die if they want. I don't know. I'm not a game designer. Why am I here? Alright, anyway, next slide. Alright, so another aside real quick is about accessibility, and it's just the fact that people won't always be able to hear your game. Sometimes people just can't hear in general. Sometimes they're playing your game on a bus where they don't have headphones or something. And so for those cases, it's usually a good idea to have some sort of alternative to important sound effects. And usually that is just the visuals, but in games, especially first-person games, where you can hear things off-screen to warn you about it, you're going to want to have some sort of system there so that people who can't hear your game can still, see things like that, I suppose. Minecraft's a good example of this, where there's an option to enable all sound effects played. There's just a list in the bottom right. Whenever a sound effect pops up, it'll flash white and then fade out as it grows distant over time. And it also has little arrows showing you if it was from the left or right. So even if you don't play with headphones, you can still understand when things are happening and not just get blindsided. Which, first-person games, very possible to do. There's a lot of things you can do. There's subtitles as well. But generally, it's a bit difficult sometimes. If your game has lots of sound effects, determining which one's the most important. So sometimes you just want to have a list like Minecraft does. Sometimes you can have visual indicators. I know often in shooter games, whenever you get shot, there'll be like a little arrow in the center of your screen showing the direction you got shot from. So there's lots of ways to go about approaching it. Just make sure to play your game in mute every so often to make sure it is still indeed playable.
Yeah, another obvious example is with rhythm games, where they have visual indicators of the arrows So tell you like what error you should like press. So you can still play the game muted, but it's not as
Probably shouldn't.
you shouldn't,
Especially
but you can
because
still play it.
some rhythm games like to mess with the visuals to test your rhythm, so.
Yeah.
You know
There-
Rhythm Heaven?
Yeah, Rhythm Heaven.
Notorious game.
It is a fantastic game that if you know the songs, you can play it without looking, and oftentimes looking just makes you do worse because you can't see anything. Yeah, rhythm games are sort of an exception, I guess, because most of the time you're going to play it for the music and the rhythm. So it's just one of those things you want to be careful about. I'd also like to give a little attention to a game called Veil, which is a game entirely done with sound effects. There are no visuals ever at any point. You play the entire game just by listening to the people around you, listening for sound attacks, and sound attacks. Yep, that works actually too. There is actual gameplay. Like you have to block enemy attacks by listening to where they're coming from or what they're doing, and hit back when you think they're nearby. So that's just something interesting worth looking into if you need a bit of inspiration, I suppose. I think we have one more side. Yeah. So music. Sound effects don't exist in the void. Usually there's some sort of backing music or something else going on as well. And so that can also be a difficult thing to balance, because if the music's too loud, you can't hear the sounds. And of course, you also don't want to go too far the other way, where you just can't even hear the music that your composer worked so hard on, or that you took from online. I won't judge. Generally, you do want to have people hear the music, but you don't want the music to cover other things. There's several ways you can go about doing this. You can just give the user manual control over audio settings to let them pick a balance that works for them. Some advanced settings, I believe the Fmod audio tool lets you automatically duck the music when the sound effects get loud enough, or when certain sound effects are playing, so that when the music ducks, you sort of know what's going on. But you can also just get your composer to work around the sound effects. For example, this next one is from Terraria. It's one of the boss themes, and you'll notice at first it sounds very empty. There's just not really a lot happening for a boss theme, but then you'll hear it with actual game sounds, and it'll feel a lot less empty. So. Here it is with sound effects. So yeah, it's a lot less empty when the sound effects are playing. You can sort of hear them over the music a lot easier. So this isn't always a viable option, but it is an option you can consider. I know some games will dynamically have music in separate tracks that they enable and disable over time. I know specifically games like Metal Gear Rising will actually cut to specific sections of the music when certain attacks happen, so it sort of syncs up that way. So when the guitarist is going crazy, that can be when the boss is setting things up, and then when it comes to actually doing the noisy part of striking them down, it's onto a different section. And I know, especially, I should have linked it. Anybody here remember Wii Tanks? It's just a tiny tanks game that was for Wii Sports, I want to say?
Yeah, I think.
Or it might have been the shorts, one of them. Essentially, you're just a tiny toy tank that you're trying to destroy all the enemy tanks by ricocheting your shots off walls. And it has a very intricate layered music system that will add and remove instruments depending on the type of tanks and how many are left, to the point where normally it has this, militaristic drum beat going on that actually disables itself for the last few tanks, so it sort of focuses more on the actual sound effects on the tanks moving and shooting when it gets down to that last critical moment. There's a video by Scruffy that goes into immense detail about how the system works. It's very well made.
You know Scruffy?
Yeah, Scruffy.
I don't know if it's in that video.
He has a lot of other fantastic videos. It's very worth checking out. Yes?
I was just gonna say a good example in Metal Gear Rising is they specifically, and the devices themselves will cut to like the actual song during key points of the fight.
Yeah.
Or like more scripted points of it, but otherwise it'll just be more in the background on loop.
Yeah, and there's also sorry, go ahead.
It still does fade in the actual words during those key points without going back to a different point of the song.
Yeah. So as you were saying, a lot of the tracks in the game have lyrics to them, but generally when you first start fighting the boss, there's not going to be lyrics. You're just playing the instrumental on loop in the background, so you can sort of focus on what's going on. And then once the boss starts sort of kicking into gear or doing a special attack, that's sort of when the lyrics come in to sort of take focus for moments.
Aiden mentioned that Fire Emblem has 2 versions of every battle track and will fade between them depending on whether you're on the map or actively in combat.
Yeah, that's a really cool detail. And sometimes it'll actively reverse them, because usually the map theme is going to be all calm and collected because you're doing tactician things, you're planning and doing strategy, and it'll go to the crazy, high energy drum-filled sections, or they're not always drum-filled. They'll go to the more energetic versions when you actually see your characters doing the combat. And during that part, you don't actually have any control. You're just watching your strategy play out. So it makes sense that you can focus more on the crazy bombastic music and the characters fighting. But there is actually a certain map that does the opposite, where the battle theme is the map theme is very, very intense. Then the calm theme, I'm spoiling myself. Yeah, the map theme is very, very intense, but then when you go into a battle, it just becomes this very calm, somber piano theme. So, and that can be a very effective contrast. Though that's more delving into music rather than sound effects. It's still a good example. Yeah. Sorry I'm stumbling over my words so much.
Okay.
That's just how it is with speaking to people and speaking in general. Right. So, for actually creating sound effects, there's generally going to be 2 sort of sections, I suppose, and that's going to be sections that you record from the physical real world we exist in, and there's going to be effects that you synthesize through some sort of computer process. So for getting real world sound effects, all you need for the base minimum is a mic of some sorts, and usually, your phone will have that, your computer will have that, or you can buy a really cheap one at Walmart. It won't be the best for quality, and of course there's a bunch of people who are more talented at this than I that'll have actual hardware recommendations of what to get. But for the absolute basics, any microphone will work just to capture the sound. And this is where it starts getting very experimental. You just kind of want to start taking objects and seeing what sounds they make. See what you can interact with it. So maybe this table has a different sound if I hit it with the back of my hand than the front. Or if I take this book back here and that's a different sound. And of course there's plenty of objects to try messing around on. That Coke bottle, if you were to bop it on the desk for a moment, it would make a different sound than if you were to hit it with your hand or your pencil or whatnot. Want to give us a demonstration? Yeah. So, yeah.
I remember seeing a video of some people who anchor up in Antarctica. It was somewhere with like a lot of flat ice, and there was a like a little borehole, where they had a big old drill down there. Someone tossed like a rock or something down there, and it spiraled down. And when it landed at the bottom, it sounded like a cartoon gunshot.
Yeah. And a lot of sound effects that are cartoon effects were made just by real-world effects. The famous Star Wars laser shot sound was done by taking a wrench and hitting like a wire with it.
Yeah.
And that just creates the sound. So again, just take objects, hit other objects with them. Make sure not to break it, though. We're not going to be held responsible if you break a window in pursuit of your sound effects. Yes?
Sans' mouth sound effect?
Yes.
Undertale? I
Yes,
don't know if
that
it's
is
true.
from Patrick, I believe.
Is it actually, did Toby Fox actually do that, or is that just a theory?
I am pretty sure the sound is nearly exact. Like, people have done studies on it. So, I would not be surprised.
Also, the iconic dolphin sound effect that that they play in cartoons is actually a bird. It's an Australian bird. I forgot the name, but it makes random sound effects. You just look up like Australian bird sound effects, and it's just like,
Similarly, the typical bald eagle screech you hear whenever anything remotely American comes on in TV isn't actually from a bald eagle. I think it's from a...
it's a hawk.
Yeah, it's a hawk.
Yeah.
So take sounds from anywhere and everywhere. Take it from the wildlife, take it from hitting objects. Maybe don't hit the wildlife, though. I think that's bad.
Also, the same with the line roar is actually like a combination of like a bear and like a tiger, something like that.
And of course, don't forget water. Water is something you see everywhere, and people don't really use it to its full extent in making sound. So water running over sound, or like running over objects, can provide different things. Water filling something, filling something with water can do it. Like, I'm certain you've all heard of, people taking a bunch of glasses, filling them with different amounts of water, and it plays different notes like that. That's not just for glasses. You can do all sorts of things. I have a metal water bottle at home, and when it has the right amount of water in it, if you shake it up a bit, it creates this really nice metal ting sound. I don't know how it happened, but it's very fantastic. So again, mess around with water, mess around with objects, mess around with everything. Maybe don't mess around with water on your microphone. That might break it. So be careful with your objects so you don't break it. Again, trial and error, try everything. You can never have too much sound just lying around. Right. Furthermore, most sounds aren't just one sound. It's very rare for like the Star Wars story of hit a wire with a wrench and it just makes the sound perfect as is.
Well,
Often, oh sorry.
I looked it up. It's a lot bigger wire. It's
like it's not like electrical wire. It's like a big steel wire.
Yeah.
But yeah, most sounds, especially the memorable ones, are combinations of other sounds. Like I believe the Law and Order sounds, like the Law and Order sort of TV jingle, if anyone's familiar with that. The sound designer for that answered in an interview that it was like 50 different sounds all mixed together. If you listen to the whole thing, it doesn't sound like it, but it's just a lot of different sounds combined in different ways to do it. So, yeah. Furthermore, again, just get a bunch of sounds, mix them together. Sometimes you just get a seemingly regular sound, and then you can just mix it with something else, and it just transforms it completely. It's essentially just black magic, I swear. I have a few examples I can show off for a showcase later. But yeah, there's also sites you can use for generating sounds. Of course, besides just computer, there's sfxer.me. This is a fantastic site for creating more retro-styled sounds. There's a lot of options you can mess with, and a button that will just randomly adjust certain dials by a little bit. So you can, if you like a sound, you can just start creating variations on it really easily. It is just fantastic, the results you can get. And even if you don't think you need electronic style sound effects, again, you can combine them with other things for very, very cool results. They can add just that extra bit of punch to everything. A lot of people will make games like, oh, I'm not making a retro game, why do I need retro sounds? And trust me, this isn't like a plague. You won't include one SFX or sound and all of a sudden your game is turned into 8 bits. It can add quite a lot of punch, and it can be quite subtle too. Yeah, if there is one thing you take away from this whole slides, it is this website. Absolutely mess around with it. Yeah. And then finally is the editing. You have a bunch of bass sounds, you want to put them together. So here's you're going to want to have some sort of audio editing software for this. I personally use Audacity for this, but there's plenty of alternatives out there if you'd like. And you just want to sort of, again, every single phase of this involves experimentation. You're going to want to look around at the effects. Audacity especially has like a giant list of effects so large that it doesn't even fit all in one screen. You have to scroll it. And that can be intimidating, but you just got to start messing around and seeing what happens. The one that I'd start recommending is just the pulse stretch sound effect, which is very good for taking a sound and making it sort of more atmospheric. Like imagine, you know how there's like those cannons where you can like yell something, they echo it back? Imagine if they echoed it in like a more slow, dramatic way. That's pulse stretch. It's very, very powerful. Or powerful if you like puns. There's the sliding time scale pitch shifts. which lets you speed up or increase or decrease the pitch or sound of a song over time. So it can start out normal and like pitch down, and that can create some very cool effects as well. There's the phaser, which just sort of applies. It's hard to even describe. Do you know how you describe a phaser?
I'm not too sure what it is.
Okay. It's just one of those things you just have to mess around with, and then you'll kind of understand. But it's very much worth messing around. And then reverb, I'm pretty sure reverb is just one of those terms that's escaped the audio engineering world. It just gives things a nice bit of echo.
Yeah.
Like how my voice is sort of being given this amplification from being in a large room. Reverb can be used to add a lot of depth or backing to your sounds. So if you want like an attack that's powerful or lingers, a good place to start is by slapping some reverb on it. And a few other tricks is that if you duplicate a sound and you adjust the pitch of it, they combine together in a very interesting way. And reversing it, you can also reverse a sound usually, where it just plays it backwards. You can reverse a sound, apply an effect to that, which I'm particularly partial of reverb, and then flipping it back again will sort of have the reverb lead up to it, which can give things a supernatural feeling. So instead of it's just starting, it just sort of has this weird build up to it. And again, I'll show that in Showcase. It's very, very cool.
I think that's how they did the FNAF screen, right? It was like a reverse of something else, I think.
I think it was a sped up screen.
Maybe. But yeah, just reversing a sound effect, applying some sort of effect to it, and then reversing again can lead to some very cool results, especially when I go for something supernatural or just otherwise powerful or otherworldly.
Usually there's like some like all-powerful character might use that in their speaking lines, but also with the Devil May Cry intro and title sequence, usually for most of the games they use that as the title comes up on screen, and it's a pretty cool intro to those games.
Again, experimentation is key. Try sounds, try everything. Just sit down with all the sounds, apply effects, see how that works. Audacity has a preview button on it, so you can sort of listen to a small fraction of what it would sound like and then adjust it easily. So, hate to sound like a broken record. Experiment, experiment, experiment. Gather the sounds, mix the sounds, keep going until you get something cool. And generally when you do, you're going to want to write down the steps you've used so you can replicate it later. Because a lot of it is just find what works, change something, see if that also works, until you get yourself a nice little set of effects and procedures that create cool things. Like again, this whole thing right here, I just discovered it by messing around. Just mess around, see what you get.